Welcome. Today is September 10th, and it is World Suicide Prevention Day. As some of you may know, persons who've been following me for the past couple of years, I do a video every year. And this year, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about what is suicide, how does it affect us, how do we know when someone's thinking of suicide, what does their behavior look like, how do we know when they want help. So let's start off first with what is suicide? The definition is a conscious decision to end one's life. This can be done in several stages. Someone just doesn't wake up one day and is like, yes, today I'm going to kill myself. Many times there is ideation, which is believing that you don't have the will to live. You may say to yourself, I'm just so fed up, I'm just so tired. I want to not be around anymore. I just want to fall asleep and never wake up. That's ideation. We then have contemplation, which is now starting to really believe, yes, life would be better if I wasn't here. Life would be better if I died. And start making a plan, depending on what it is that you think will be more successful. That will be the plan you usually come up with. The third stage is action. So you're going to, at this point in time, attempt the plan that you contemplated. So ideation, contemplation, action, and then completion. Now, there's many people who don't complete. There's many people who stay in the ideation for weeks, years, months before they even move on to contemplation. There are people who are stuck in contemplation for years before, could be almost 20 years before they actually move on that contemplation. It all really depends on, I guess, in your mind, how serious you are and how bad the situation is. And oftentimes we see that when persons are suffering, they may have moments where they decide, and a lot of people say this, like Riza, I didn't see it coming. They literally were fine one day and then they weren't anymore. And in those cases, I call those like snap suicides, but I refuse to think that these impulsive suicide attempts are copycat syndrome, which we had like in 2014 in Guyana. I really just genuinely believe that those persons are suffering, they are in pain, and instead of suicide being their last resort, it's their first resort. And that's something that we'll discuss in terms of like culture and how a history of mental health or a history of suicide in the family can increase your likelihood of committing suicide. I also want to just lead with this definition as well as understanding the language with suicide. So if you complete suicide and you die, it's not you committed suicide. I know that's what we use a lot, but it's death by suicide. If you are someone who contemplates and then attempts and you survive, you're a survivor of suicide, or you were a suicide attempt. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if I make sense today. Um, so I just wanted to clear that. Suicide is not weakness. It is not selfish. It may seem selfish to you, the person who's on the outside, but I think if we stepped into the mind and body and emotions of someone who's suffering so much that suicide is their next solution, that we would understand how much pain they're really in. So, factors that contribute to suicide. There are several factors that contribute to suicide. Anything from a toxic home environment, a toxic work environment, job dissatisfaction, an unhealthy relationship, abuse, drug use, mental health related challenges. If you already have anxiety and depression, suicidality goes up. If you have a history of suicide in your family, and this seems to be where that concept of copycat comes from. But again, certain behaviors are modeled. Coping mechanisms and coping with stress is modeled by our parents and our family and our community. If you come from a community with a high level of suicide, it does put you at an increased risk of suicide. If you have a grandparent that you knew that used to attempt suicide or still does attempt suicide, or a parent, yes, there is a likelihood that there's an increased likelihood of you attempting or even thinking ideation wise about suicide. Good. Um, of course, lost opportunities. That's why we see in COVID a lot of persons the increase in suicidality because for many persons, COVID has presented challenges regarding safety and opportunity and the lack thereof or the loss of opportunity. Say you may have prepared to go off to university like this September or or October, that's gone potentially. And this can leave us feeling very unmotivated, very disappointed, and persons sometimes blame themselves. We can't blame ourselves for COVID related changes in life. It is a pandemic and it has influenced us in all various types of ways. So, those lost opportunities, financial stress, legal troubles, loneliness. Again, do you see where how COVID is now making us have an increased suicidality? What are some of the behaviors that we can look for? So, what does a person who's thinking of suicide look like, act like? Um, like many people say, they did not know someone was about to commit suicide, but a lot of times people do kind of give us a heads up. They do say, hey, like, I'm just really tired, or I'm really fed up of X, and I just really want to sleep and never wake up. And, or they might try and withdraw, step away from people, become isolated. They don't want to interact. They don't want to talk about their problems. They can have a lot of mood changes, personality changes. If you really study someone well, if you know someone well, you can say, like you should be able to recognize if there's behavior changes. And these behavior changes should be able to give you some indication of what is happening in that person's life, right? So we're looking for behavior changes, mood changes. If someone was quite perky and then 2 months later they were very withdrawn, they're very down, they may not be thinking about suicide, but something is definitely happening. It could be stress, it could be a relationship, it could be family, it can be finances. We don't know until we ask. So the first thing we always tell people is to ask, and we'll talk about that in a little while. We also see persons engaging in risky behavior. They don't really care much about their well-being anymore because they know shh, shh, because I'm sorry guys, because they know that they already have a plan in their head. Another aspect shh, another aspect that we can see is that persons tend to become very calm. So, say they were being very erratic, and then all of a sudden they're very calm. And now you want to, you're going to wonder why was this person who was just a few weeks ago really stressed out, really depressed, really isolated, all of a sudden is really calm? More than likely, they're really calm because they're already planning something in their head. They've already moved on from ideation to contemplation. And so it's very important to recognize those behavior changes. We also see persons, they're going to probably have a lot of fatigue, irritation, because they're probably not sleeping well. They're probably not eating the same way they would be. They're getting rid of stuff. That's something like persons who are really contemplating and have a plan, they're probably getting rid of stuff. They're calling you out of the blue. They might want to all of a sudden bury the hatchets on an issue that maybe happened years ago. They want to basically relieve themselves of any guilt or burden or regret. And so they might try and make amends with people that they haven't spoken to in a long time. They may message you, they may write you letters, they might leave you letters if when they think they're about to die. So those are some of the things that we definitely see. Um, Persons may also change their appearance, so maybe they're not taking care of their hygiene as much anymore. And again, these are not necessarily signs that they want to commit suicide, but it may just be definitely signs that they're dealing with maybe a mental health challenge. So that could be depression, that could be anxiety. Maybe they're being stalked by a crazy ex. We don't know, but we need to ask, right? Um, Signs from wanting help. So persons will try and reach out. So that's what those things are what happens when they're contemplating. But when they actually want help, they're going to kind of sometimes do the opposite in the sense of they're going to, instead of isolating, they're going to come out a little bit more. They're going to reach out to people who are a little bit more helpful. They're going to reach out to people that they trust. They're going to probably talk about things in a very like casual manner and hope that you ask them something. They might say things like, I'm really fed up with this relationship. I really want to move away from Guyana. I really don't want to be here anymore, and it really is up to you where that conversation goes. How do they move from feeling overwhelmed to feeling like they have options? And so they may um, be using increased drug use, but when they want to start seeking help, they may stop spending time with those types of people who are alcoholics or only lime and drink, and they've already realized like these people are not good for their psyche, and so they might pull away. And so those kind of behavior changes are really important. They actually may come out and say, "Do you know the number for so and so?" Or do you ever feel like sometimes like life is just not worth it? Again, these are the symbols for you to interject and say something, like it's those are not regular behaviors. Those are not regular behaviors. Um, they might be able to come forward, but we have to create the space for them. So the last thing I'm going to address, what do we do when people seem or even remotely directly say to us they're thinking of suicide? Now, this is a question I get every time. And I want you to understand that it is not an easy question, even as a professional to answer. Because I think some of the things that maybe we've even been trained, or maybe other counselors have been trained, not really psychologists, is to ask questions like this. But what would your family think? What about your boyfriend? What about your daughter? But you have that great job. Why don't you live for that? Okay, my boyfriend sucks. My kid hates me. My job, I don't get paid enough. I'm overworked and I'm taken advantage of. And my family is trash. What are you going to say to them then? What do you say to persons who already have such a negative outlook on the circumstances? It can backfire. So please, please do not tell people to think of their family. Do not tell people to think of their loved ones. Because in their mind, if they already have a plan, they've already assumed that no one cares. They already know that the world, or they believe the world will be a better place once they're gone. And they have fed themselves this rhetoric for long enough that they believe it, that they're going to act on it. So the first thing you want to ask, when someone sounds like they're saying like they want to commit suicide, you want to ask, why are you saying this? Where is this coming from? Is something wrong? And if they say, like, I want to die, it is the hardest thing to hear, but you have to be able to say, well, sorry. When they say that, you want to be able to say, well, what can I do to help? What is there that I can do to keep you alive? I want to keep you alive. I care about you. Do you have a plan? That's one of the first things you want to ask. Do you have a plan? And if you have a plan, you want to be able to get to an emergency, you want to get to a public hospital, you want to get to the psychiatric hospital, you want to call their psychologist. If you know they have the psychologist, you can say, have you been seeing somebody? Did something happen recently? Because don't get me wrong, people can be in therapy, but sometimes therapy can be really overwhelming. And they know they can't tell their therapist because then ethically we have to call the police or we have to take them to the hospital. That's what we are ethically told we have to do. So they're not going to tell us. Like if someone really wants to die, they actually might not even tell you. That's the difference. The difference between someone who wants help and doesn't want help and is really adamant about dying. The difference is they may not tell you. And so when someone is saying, like, I think I want to die, or I'm fed up of living, or I'm fed up of being here, we really should ask them, do you have a plan? And if you don't have a plan, then what can I do for you right now that would give you a different option? And then you want to call potentially a loved one, or you want to ask them, who can I call? Because it may not be a loved one. It might be a neighbor, it might be a teacher, it might be a coworker, non-blood. And so you don't want to assume of calling like the mother or the boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever when they might be the person triggering this person to want to die. So ask them, is there someone I can call? Is there something I can do for you? Don't make promises you can't keep. Do not say everything is going to be all right. We don't know that. I remember being in social work, and that was one of the first things I learned. Do not say to a client everything's going to work out, because we don't know that. We can try our best to help people, but that doesn't mean that it will everything will work out. Maybe something will work out. Maybe you won't kill yourself, which is the best thing that could work out. But the reality is we can't make promises we can't keep. Trust is very important in this process. If the person's telling you, they probably trust you. They probably trust you to help them. Don't mock them. Don't tell them cheer up. Please don't tell them to pray it out. Because let me tell you something, they've done all that. They've done all that and it hasn't worked. So please support them. Do not mock them. Do not make fun of them. Oh, you got mental health problems, or you got an issue, or I don't know if I do with you. I don't know if I fed up. I fed up because maybe they've probably spoken to you before about wanting to die. But it's really scary thinking about going to therapy, and it's really scary dealing with the things that are making you feel so much pain and that is causing you suffrage. But you have to kind of stay behind them. That's just the reality. If they trust you, there's a reason they trust you. If they're telling you and you've been their savior, and maybe you've saved them once before, there's a reason they're coming back to you, because they don't want to die. So many people who commit suicide do not want to die. They just want the feelings to be over with. They want the pain to be over with. They want the anxiety to be over with. They want the voices in their head to stop. Am I making sense tonight? I just really wanted to make sure I covered like my notes. Are there any questions? I can actually see the comments tonight. I'm really hoping I wasn't glitching. I'm seeing a lot of hellos and highs and shared and so on. Thank you. This is the service I'm telling you about. Thank you. Um, any questions? Did I clear up a lot of things? I know I try to stay under the 20-minute mark, and I just want you guys to know that there's a reason we observe this day. We observe this day because millions of people around the world commit suicide, or die by suicide, or attempt suicide. And it's up to us to be our neighbor's keeper, our best friend's keeper, our partner's keeper, and understand that even when we feel like we don't have control or power or the capacity to help people, you have no idea what just sending a message to someone you haven't spoken to in a long time and is putting out like really weird, dark quotes and dark messages and dark pictures on their Facebooks and stuff and WhatsApp and Instagram. You have no idea what sending them that message could do for them. And so I just want to encourage you all. I always have a call to action. Make contact tonight with someone who you know is suffering. Make contact with someone that you haven't spoken to in a long time. Make contact with someone who maybe you guys had a really stupid fight and you haven't spoken to them and you guys are really close. Maybe you were that person's savior. Maybe that person was your savior. And I want to send a message to the persons who are suffering with mental health. Know that you are not alone. You will never be alone. There are therapists, there are people, there are strangers you will never meet who care about your well being. And as long as I am a psychologist and as long as I have my clients, I will always look out for their well being. And I will always try to protect them as best as I can, even when they're vexed at me, even when they're upset that I called their emergency contact to say, look, this person is suicide gesturing and they have a plan. We do it to protect you. We do it because we want you to live. So if you are feeling this way, please, please, there's suicide numbers, hotlines. I'll put it on the page. Know that my page also has numbers of other psychologists, and to know that you need professional help. Suicide doesn't just poof go away. The longer you suffer, the more than likely the belief that death is better becomes real. And it's not. It's never. There's no empirical evidence to suggest that life after this one is any better. Okay? So I just wanted to leave that with you guys. I hope you have a insightful and safe September 10th at 8 o'clock. We will be lighting our candles at the window. For those who don't know, I just have my candle right here, prepped and ready. I was lighting it last night. So at 8 o'clock, we're going to light our candles at the window, and that is to send a message of hope, send a message of support, and send a message that we are still thinking of the ones we've lost to suicide and the survivors of suicide. We have a question. I'm just going to read it out. I recommend your service to a friend this morning. Thank you. She explained her depression to me this morning, but I never knew she experienced such often. I'm listening to you, and I don't know, I don't want to tell her other than recommending therapy to her. Um, Again, it if she's in a place where she's definitely depressed and she knows she's heading towards suicide ideation, catching her now in therapy is really critical. So I would definitely encourage them, whoever they are, to seek support. I know it's scary. I know you don't want to talk about whatever it is that's making you feel this way, but there's got to be other